Hello doctors, welcome back. Following the lecture series of the muscles of upper limb, in this video lecture we will discuss the anatomy of the muscles of the anterior compartment of the forearm region. Student, the muscles of the forearm regions are divided into three layers: superficial layer, intermediate layer, and the deep layer. The muscles of these superficial layers are the pronator teres muscle, flexor carpi radialis muscle, palmaris longus muscle, and the flexor carpi ulnaris muscles. Student, first we will discuss the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle, which is one of the muscles of the superficial group of the anterior compartment of the forearm region. So this is the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle. Student, the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle has two heads: the humeral head, which originates from the medial epicondyle of the humerus bone, and the ulnar head, which originates from the olecranon process of the ulna and the posterior surface of the ulna bone. We have discussed the olecranon process in the anatomy of the ulna bone. Student, the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle originate and run inferiorly and insert on the pisiform bone of the carpal. This is the pisiform bone, and it also insert on the hook process of the hamate bone. This is the hook process of the hamate bone, and also to the base of the fifth metacarpal bone. This is the fifth metacarpal bone. This is the base of the fifth metacarpal bone. This is the shaft of the fifth metacarpal bone, while this is the head. So the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle insert on the pisiform bone, hook of the hamate bone, and the base of the fifth metacarpal bone. The proper insertion is not shown in the diagram. Now student, moving toward the blood supply of the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle. So the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle is mainly supplied by the ulnar artery. This is the ulnar artery, which is the branch of the brachial artery. Flexor carpi ulnaris muscle is also supplied by the posterior recurrent ulnar artery. This is the posterior ulnar recurrent artery. This is the branch of the ulnar artery. Now student, moving toward the innervation of the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle. So the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle is innervated by the ulnar nerve. This is the ulnar nerve, and the ulnar nerve originates from the medial cord of the brachial plexus. Now student, moving toward the actions of the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle. So this muscle play important role in the flexion of the hand at the wrist joint, and it also play important role in the adduction of the hand at the wrist joint. Now student, as we have discussed the anatomy of the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle, so here we will overview this muscle. As we have discussed, it has two heads: the humeral head, which originates from the medial epicondyle of the humerus bone; the ulnar head originates from the olecranon process and the posterior border of the ulna bone. Now student, this muscle run inferiorly and insert on the pisiform bone, the hook of the hamate bone, and the base of the fifth metacarpal bone. The action of the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle is the flexion and adduction of the hand at the wrist joint. The flexor carpi ulnaris muscle is supplied by the ulnar artery and the posterior ulnar recurrent artery, which is also the branch of the ulnar artery, while the ulnar artery is the branch of the brachial artery. The innervation of the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle is the ulnar nerve. The ulnar nerve originates from the medial cord of the brachial plexus. Now student, moving toward the another muscle of the anterior compartment of the forearm, which is the palmaris longus muscle. Student, the palmaris longus muscle originates from the medial epicondyle of the humerus bone. This is the medial epicondyle of the humerus bone. This muscle originates and run inferiorly and laterally and passes under the flexor retinaculum. This is the flexor retinaculum, which is not shown in the diagram. And this muscle insert on the palmar aponeurosis. This region, this is the palmar aponeurosis. Student, the palmar aponeurosis is the continuation of the tendon, and this insert into the deep fascia of the palm region. Now moving toward the blood supply of the palmaris longus muscle. Student, the palmaris longus muscle is supplied by the ulnar artery. The ulnar artery is the branch of the brachial artery. Here, this is the brachial artery, and it gives branch to the ulnar artery at the cubital fossa region. This region is the cubital fossa region. Now moving toward the innervation of the palmaris longus muscle. This muscle is innervated by the median nerve. This is the median nerve. The median nerve originates from the medial and the lateral cord of the brachial plexus. Now moving toward the action of the palmaris longus muscle. So this muscle play an important role in the flexion of the hand. Now student, as we have studied the anatomy of the palmaris longus muscle, we will overview this muscle. As this muscle originates from the medial epicondyle of the humerus bone, and it runs inferiorly and laterally and passes under the flexor retinaculum and insert on the palmar aponeurosis. The action of the palmaris longus muscle is it plays an important role in the flexion of the hand, and it is supplied by the ulnar artery and innervated by the median nerve. Student, the median nerve originates from the medial and the lateral cord of the brachial plexus. Now student, moving toward the another muscle of the anterior compartment of the forearm, the flexor carpi radialis muscle. This is the flexor carpi radialis muscle. Student, the flexor carpi radialis muscle originates from the medial epicondyle of the humerus bone. This is the medial epicondyle of the humerus bone. This muscle runs inferiorly and laterally, and it inserts on the base of the second and third metacarpal bones. These are the metacarpal bones. This is the first metacarpal bone. This is the second metacarpal bone, third, fourth, and fifth. So this muscle inserts on the base of the second and third metacarpal bone. It is not shown in the diagram, but it inserts on the second and the third metacarpal bone. Now student, moving toward the blood supply of the flexor carpi radialis muscle. So this muscle is supplied by the ulnar artery. This is the ulnar artery, which is the branch of the brachial artery. And it is also supplied by the posterior ulnar recurrent artery. This is the posterior ulnar recurrent artery. Now student, moving toward the innervation of the flexor carpi radialis muscle. This muscle is innervated by the median nerve. This is the median nerve. The median nerve, student, originates from the medial and the lateral cord of the brachial plexus. Now student, moving toward the action of the flexor carpi radialis muscle. So this muscle play important role in the flexion of the hand at the wrist region or the wrist joint, and it also play important role in the adduction of the hand at the wrist joint. Now student, moving toward another muscle of the anterior compartment of the forearm region, which is the pronator teres muscle. This is the pronator teres muscle. Student, this muscle originates from the medial epicondyle of the humerus bone and also from the coronoid process. This is the coronoid process. We have studied this in the osteology of the ulnar bone. So this muscle has two heads, the ulnar head which originates from the coronoid process and the humeral head which originates from the epicondyle of the humerus bone. So this muscle runs inferiorly and laterally, and this muscle inserts on the posterior side of the radius bone. Here, as you can see, this muscle originates in this way, run inferiorly and laterally, and it move around the posterior surface of the radius bone and insert on the shaft of the posterior surface of the radius bone. Now student, moving toward the blood supply of the pronator teres muscle. So this muscle is supplied by the anterior ulnar recurrent artery. This is the anterior ulnar recurrent artery, which is the branch of the ulnar artery. And student, this muscle is also supplied by the inferior ulnar collateral artery. This is the inferior ulnar collateral artery, and this is the branch of the brachial artery. Now student, the innervation of the pronator teres muscle is, this muscle is innervated by the median nerve. This is the median nerve. Student, the median nerve arises from the medial and the lateral cord of the brachial plexus. Now student, the action of the pronator teres muscle is, it plays an important role in the pronation and the flexion of the forearm. Now student, as we have studied the anatomy of the pronator teres muscle, so we will review this muscle as it has two heads, the humeral head and the ulnar head. The humeral head originates from the medial epicondyle, while the ulnar head originates from the medial border of the coronoid process. This muscle runs inferiorly and laterally and insert on the lateral side of the shaft of the radius bone. The action of the pronator teres muscle is the pronation and the flexion of the forearm. This muscle is supplied by the inferior ulnar collateral artery, which is the branch of the brachial artery, and also it is supplied by the anterior ulnar recurrent artery, which is the branch of the ulnar artery. Student, this muscle is innervated by the median nerve. The median nerve originates from the medial and the lateral cord of the brachial plexus. Now student, as we have discussed the muscles of the superficial layer of the anterior compartment, now we will discuss the muscles of the intermediate layer. So there is only one muscle in the intermediate layer, which is the flexor digitorum superficialis muscle. This muscle has two heads, the humero-ulnar head and the radial head. The humero-ulnar head originates from the medial epicondyle of the humerus bone and the coronoid process of the ulnar bone, while the radial head originates from the anterior aspect of the radial bone. Student, this muscle runs inferiorly and divide into the argivorise to the four tendons. These four tendons passes under the flexor retinaculum and insert into the middle phalanges of the each fingers. This is the middle phalanges of the each fingers. Now student, moving toward the blood supply of the flexor digitorum superficialis muscle. So this muscle is supplied by the ulnar artery. This is the ulnar artery, which is the branch of the brachial artery, and it is also supplied by the anterior ulnar recurrent artery. This is the anterior ulnar recurrent artery, which is the branch of the ulnar artery. Now student, moving toward the innervation of the flexor digitorum superficialis muscle. So this muscle is innervated by the median nerve. The median nerve originates from the medial and the lateral cord of the brachial plexus. Students, now moving toward the action of the flexor digitorum superficialis muscle. This muscles play important role in the flexion of the middle phalanges of the fingers, and it assists the flexion of the proximal phalanges of the fingers. Now student, as we have studied the anatomy of the flexor digitorum superficialis muscle. Student, the flexor digitorum superficialis muscle is the only muscle in the intermediate layer of the anterior compartment. This muscle has two heads, the humero-ulnar head, which originate from the medial epicondyle of the humerus bone and the coronoid process of the ulnar bone, while the radial head originate from the anterior border of the radial shaft. These muscles run inferiorly and divide into 4 tendons. These tendons attach or insert into the middle phalanges of the medial 4 fingers. This muscle plays an important role in the flexion of the middle phalanges of the fingers, and it assists or helps in the flexing of the proximal phalanges. This muscle is supplied by the anterior ulnar recurrent artery, which is the branch of the ulnar artery. The innervation of the flexor digitorum superficialis muscle is the median nerve. The median nerve arises from the medial and the lateral cord of the brachial plexus. Now student, we have discussed the muscles of the superficial layer and the muscles of the intermediate layer of the forearm region. Now we will discuss the deep muscles of the anterior compartment of the forearm. We will remove the superficial muscle and the intermediate muscles of the anterior compartment of the forearm. So these are the deep muscles of the anterior compartment regions, which are the flexor digitorum profundus and the flexus pollicis longus muscle and the pronator quadratus muscle. We will discuss each muscle in detail one by one. Student, first we will discuss the flexor digitorum profundus muscle. The flexor digitorum profundus muscle originates from the anterior medial aspect of the ulnar bone. This is the ulnar bone, and here this muscle originates from the anterior and medial aspect. These muscles run inferiorly and passes under the flexor retinaculum and divide into the 4 tendons. These tendons insert into the distal phalanges. This is the distal phalanges of the medial 4 fingers. These are the medial 4 fingers, and this is the proximal phalanges. This is the middle phalanges, and this is the distal phalanges. So the tendons of this muscle insert into the distal phalanges of the medial 4 fingers. Now student, moving toward the blood supply of the flexor digitorum profundus muscle. So this muscle is supplied by the posterior ulnar recurrent artery. This posterior ulnar recurrent artery is the branch of the ulnar artery, and the ulnar artery is the branch of the brachial artery. So it is supplied by the posterior ulnar recurrent artery. Now student, moving toward the innervation of the flexor digitorum profundus muscle. So this muscle is innervated by the median nerve and the ulnar nerve. Now student, as we have studied the anatomy of the flexor digitorum profundus muscle, now we will overview this muscle as it originates from the anterior medial aspect of the shaft of the ulnar bone, while it divides into 4 tendons, and these 4 tendons insert into the distal phalanges of the medial 4 fingers. The action of this muscle is it plays an important role in the flexion of the distal phalanges, and it assists the middle and the proximal phalanges in the flexion. This muscle is supplied by the posterior ulnar recurrent artery, while it is innervated by the ulnar and the median nerve together. Now student, moving toward another muscle of the deep layer of the anterior compartment, the flexor pollicis longus muscle. Student, the flexor pollicis longus muscle originates from the medial aspect of the shaft of the radius bone. This is the shaft of the radius bone, and this muscle originates from the medial aspect of the shaft of the radius bone. It runs inferiorly and passes under the flexor retinaculum and insert into the distal phalanges of the thumb. This is the thumb finger, and this muscle insert into the distal phalanges of the thumb. Now student, moving toward the blood supply of the flexor pollicis longus muscle. So this muscle is supplied by the radial artery. The radial artery is the branch of the brachial artery, and student, it is also supplied by the anterior interosseous artery. This is the anterior interosseous artery. This anterior interosseous artery is the branch of the ulnar artery. So the anterior interosseous artery and the radial artery supply the flexor pollicis longus muscle. Now student, moving toward the innervation of the flexor pollicis longus muscle. So this muscle is innervated by the median nerve. Now student, moving toward the action of the flexor pollicis longus muscle. This muscle plays an important role in the flexion of the distal phalanges of the thumb. Now student, as we have studied the anatomy of the flexor pollicis longus muscle, here we will overview this muscle as it originates from the anterior surface of the shaft of the radius bone, the anterior medial surface. And this muscle insert to the distal phalanges of the thumb. This muscle plays an important role in the flexion of the distal phalanges of the thumb. It is supplied by the radial artery and the anterior interosseous artery, which is the branch of the ulnar artery. And this muscle is innervated by the median nerve. Now student, we will discuss the last muscle of the deep layer of the anterior compartment of the forearm, which is the pronator quadratus muscle. Student, the pronator quadratus muscle is present deep to the 2 muscles of the deep layer of the anterior compartment. So this is the pronator quadratus muscle. Student, the pronator quadratus muscle originates from the anterior surface of the radius bone, and it originates into the anterior surface of the ulnar bone. Now student, the pronator quadratus muscle is supplied by the anterior interosseous artery. Student, the anterior interosseous artery is the branch of the ulnar artery, and the ulnar artery originates from the brachial artery. Now student, moving toward the innervation of the pronator quadratus muscle. So the pronator quadratus muscle is innervated by the median nerve. This is the median nerve, and here it innervates the pronator quadratus muscle. Now student, the pronator quadratus muscle, as its name indicates, it plays an important role in the pronation of the forearm. Student, as we have discussed the anatomy of the pronator quadratus muscle, here we will overview this muscle as it originates from the anterior surface of the shaft of the ulna bone and it inserts into the anterior surface of the shaft of the radius bone. So this muscle, as its name indicates, the pronator, so it's pronate the forearm, while this muscle is supplied by the anterior interosseous artery. Student, the anterior interosseous artery is the branch of the ulnar artery, and this muscle is innervated by the median nerve, and the median nerve give branch to the anterior interosseous nerve, which supply the which innervate the pronator quadratus muscle. So student, this was all about the muscles of the anterior compartment of the forearm. In next video we will discuss the muscles of the lateral compartment and the posterior compartment of the forearm region.